this is a real opportunity, and there's a lot of uranium tied up in rare earths around the world. Why not? We have the facility, we have the permits, we have the tailings. I don't see any reason it cannot be $50 million a year. Who knows, maybe more, maybe $100 million a year. Extra business in addition to uranium production.
How would those arrangements work? Are they JVs with people? Are they just, commissioning you to just process their ore and they take all the upside? How do you make money? Hello and welcome to Crux Investor. First of all, thanks so much for watching this video. If you like it, give us a thumbs up. And if you could leave your comments below, it just helps us understand what questions you'd like us to ask, what you're thinking, your views on the company and so forth. So please do that. And if you haven't already done so, please click the button in the corner of the screen to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, if you want to see more videos like this, click the notification bell. We spoke earlier today to Mark Chalmers, CEO of Energy Fuels. They've made an announcement recently, which is a slight departure away from uranium and vanadium in that they're getting into the rare earth space. So we wanted to investigate what that actually means, how he's going to go about doing it, what it could mean to their bottom line. He talks us through his plans for that. We do touch upon the change in the market conditions with regards to the change in the spot price and COVID-19, etc. But take a look in the description below. If there's anything there that interests you, you can click on the relevant timestamp. That'll take you to that part of the video. Enjoy what Mark has to say. Hello, Mark. How are you, sir?
I'm excellent, Matt. How are you? It's been a while.
I know. I'm liking that painting behind you. What's going on there? Is this at home? You're at home, not at the office, are you?
When you're airing out of your living room, you just got to find something that looks, reasonable behind.
You didn't knock that up yourself, then?
No, I didn't. I don't have any artistic skills.
Okay.
I'm a mining engineer.
Mining engineer. Okay, good. Thanks for taking our call, first of all. We listened to the call yesterday with regards to your most recent announcement with regards to rare earths, getting into the rare earths business. Can you just talk us through that? What's the idea? Why rare earths?
First of all, we're very excited about this new opportunity for us, Matt. As I've said on the call, we're first and foremost a uranium producer, and that's the key focus of the business. Like vanadium and some of the other business opportunities that we're always progressing, we had a lot of inbound calls from various parties that either had rare earth projects or other sources of rare earth or the U.S. government, and it came a point where we couldn't turn our head to it. The White Mesa Mill was so uniquely suited with our ability to handle some of these streams, particularly those that have uranium content, and we have a facility that can handle this low-level material, which is a real problem for other people, but they're not a problem for us. So we decided to put out that press release. We mentioned it a few weeks ago that we were looking at it. And as I said, we would not have done that release and not be pushing this if we didn't think this had some real opportunities secondary to the uranium business for us.
So this isn't just window dressing, something to say, just kind of keep your name out there. This is a serious commercial venture.
Absolutely. It's not window dressing. And I actually think that a lot of the other uranium guys, are quite envious that we have some of this optionality. And as I said, we're not trying to brand ourselves other than first and foremost a uranium company, but this is a real opportunity. And there is a lot of uranium tied up in rare earths around the world. And why not? Why not, if we're at a head start to, most people, that we have this facility. Some of these rare earth opportunities, can't be developed because of the uranium content. They can't get the permits to process those ores. I think you're seeing, some backlashes with some of the larger rare earth producers in the world. I won't mention one of them, but they have a facility that they're getting a lot of backlash from a number of NGOs. And I don't wish harm on anybody, but we have a facility that's got 40 years of history dealing with these types of materials. at White Mesa.
Okay, like I don't think it's a secret that I like the fact that you have got experience in producing and selling uranium into the market, and the other component, and you've got cash. I think maybe you got lucky, or maybe it was good foresight on your part to raise the cash when you did, but it's certainly very useful for you now. But the third thing which I liked was the mill. Now, if I'm a shareholder, I'm going to like this a lot. If I'm invested in one of your other companies, one of your other competitor companies, I probably don't like it so much. But I need to understand what the mill is capable of. It's an extremely large mill. You've got a series of licenses on it. So maybe let's start with that. What is it licensed to do?
Okay, well, look, it's primarily licensed to treat uranium ores and vanadium ores, but over the course of the last 20 years or so, we've taken a number of other feed streams that we've had permits to receive, and most of those are low-level natural uranium streams that could come from a number of things, like, for example, resins from water treatment plants. We've received material from other uranium producers. We've received streams from some of the conversion facilities and whatnot, and recover the uranium from those streams. So we have the ability to take a number of streams. I think we have license amendments for 17 currently streams other than just primary ores. And we have taken some of those streams from other rare earth producers in the past and recovered uranium from those streams. So this is not new to us. But what is, the advantage, it's a large mill, it's about 2,000 tons per day, but most of these rare earth streams are going to be much smaller than that. So we don't need the full capacity of the mill to enter this business.
Okay, so and a few things I want you to explain there. So I'll come back to the rare earths component in a second, but when you say these streams, so you've got 17 licenses for different types of streams feeding into the mill. Does that mean that these streams operate concurrently with each other, or how do you set the mill up to run different streams at the same time?
Well, we usually do it on a batch basis. So we'll accumulate some of this material maybe for 6 months or a year or two, and then we'll do a run on that material through the mill. We actually, at the mill, we have the front end of the mill that you can process some of this material through, but we also have a separate alternate feed circuit that can enter the mill in a different location or locations. So it's very flexible, Matt, and I think I've told you before, it's really the reason the White Mesa Mill has survived the test of time is because of the foresight of the people owning the mill to make sure that it was as flexible as possible. So, this is not new, and it's been a good secondary business for the facility for decades. And we plan to expand that. I think I've said that historically it's probably been a $5 to say $15 million a year business, but I don't see any reason it cannot be $50 million a year. Who knows? Maybe more, maybe $100 million a year, extra business in addition to uranium production.
Okay, so we've talked in the past about uranium and vanadium, and people want to understand that should go and look at those videos. So let's get on to the rare earths component here. So rare earths, by definition, are rare. So therefore, they have a high value and potentially high margin. So and I don't know how much work you've done on this, but you're looking at multiple sources of feed. How would those arrangements work? Are they JVs with people? Are they just commissioning you to just process their ore and they take all the upside? How do you make money?
Well, look, that's it's still early days, as I said on the call yesterday. We're mainly looking at it from a toll processing perspective. We're also going to be evaluating a number of opportunities that are presenting themselves to find, which streams that are out there that we can process. One of the things with multiple streams is it may require, different processing equipment and different sizing of equipment. So it's very early stages, but, we're looking at initially as a toll processing arrangement, but it could be something else. I mean, we mentioned in the call that we weren't planning to, become a miner of rare earths, but again, we'll just take it a step at a time and see where it leads us. But the key bit is that we're not going to lose our capability at White Mesa for processing uranium and vanadium. It's likely that we would have a separate circuit that would be literally bolted on to the facility. Typically you're not talking the tonnages that we'd have from processing traditional ores. So as I said, it's early days, but we're very excited. And, the fact that we have the facility, we have the permits, we have the tailings areas that are state of the art, designed for 1,000 years, triple lined. We have 2 cells that have a lot of capacity, and we've been permitting 2 additional cells. So we've been looking far down the path here.
Okay.
And as I said, we're very excited about this, Matt.
No, I get it, and I get that it's early days, but I wondered why you'd made the announcement now, and therefore how much do you know? Because being able to bolt on a circuit and process presumably much lower volume of ore. Is that the case? I mean, you did sort of indicate that a second ago. Like by what quantum?
No, we could be very small quantums. I mean, instead of a facility that can process 700,000 tons per year, you could be talking, 5,000 tons, 10, 20,000 tons, very small quantities relative to what you'd process through the uranium circuit.
Right, but the margins are high because the value is high.
Yeah, a lot of it, some of the material may have been, pre-concentrated, may not be. Look, at the reason we made the announcement is that there were so many inbound calls. I mean, literally dozens and dozens of calls here of people saying, do you know what you have? Do you know what a big role White Mesa could play in this space? And I was going from call after call. So we couldn't turn our head to it. And again, that's one of the best opportunities when people are calling you and saying, we think this facility could play a role. Now, I don't talk in absolutes because we've got to take it a step at a time. But the market seemed to react positively to it. Now, we've had a number of, different factors over the last few days. The price of uranium is going up. This supply disruption because of COVID-19. And then we added this, so we've had a lot of interest in the stock, a lot of volume. We're still getting, even after that call, a lot of inbounds from other people because of that call.
No, we've been watching. The share price has bounced back up. I think the whole sector has done quite well. Obviously, it's terrible news. COVID-19 is not a pleasant thing for anyone to have to deal with, and it's affecting a lot of people in very, very negative ways. But for uranium and gold, it's what it needed. It's reacted strongly to this news, and I guess with all the negative stuff aside, uranium CEOs must be quite pleased with the way the market has reacted. I mean, you guys have been starving for 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and I think I've said this to you before too. I usually find that the, it usually takes a number of small things to add up to a major thing in this business. You saw the shutdowns of some of these facilities, and then it started, in Canada, and then you saw it in Namibia, and saw it in Kazakhstan. The conversion facility, Cameco shut down their conversion facility. So it all starts building. So then there's a shortfall of production that people were expecting. Price uranium starts to go up. The whole COVID issue has heightened the awareness on dependency on other countries, particularly some of those that are political adversaries. So all this stuff starts feeding and people start saying, going for the cheapest product isn't necessarily the best option. And it is not the best option, particularly on a number of critical materials. I'm not talking minerals, I'm talking materials that are necessary for a country like the United States of America to be ready and prepared and have security supply at different levels, to not have that total dependency.
Okay, I've got to ask this question. You did the Section 232 petition. You were one of the two guys, you and Jeff at UR Energy, okay, and you've been huddled up on Capitol Hill talking to people, knocking on doors, and you've been pushing the security issue. Has this rare earths story come about because of conversations up on the Hill? Are you getting support for this announcement from US government? I mean, is there some kind of connection between those two decisions? What was the genesis of this? You got some inbound calls, I get it, but what's the genesis of this idea?
Well, I think the genesis is the awareness over the last several years, actually, that we become overly dependent on a lot of our critical minerals, and they were basically on separate paths, separate but similar paths. Now, we've been approached by some in government on the rare earths, say even a year ago, and we expressed interest in it. But again, we don't want to lose focus. We're not trying to morph ourselves into something that we're not. We wanted to keep our main focus on uranium because that's our main game. So, we did have made a lot of contacts with the government. Several of those contacts also have an interest in rare earths, and I believe that a lot of them will be very pleased that we're being more aggressive on the rare earth front, because of particularly what we've communicated in the last few weeks. So, I think it just highlights, I think that White Mesa has the potential to be a huge critical mineral central when you look at the critical mineral of uranium, vanadium, and now we start expanding into the rare earths themselves, which are also critical minerals. Where else would you find that, Matt? In the United States or in the world? And even though we're still hanging our hat on uranium first and foremost, as I said, we can't turn our head to it, and it's a legitimate opportunity. So, we're going to be pursuing it, but, when we have to make a choice between one or the other, it's going to be first uranium going forward. But we're definitely going to focus on this with at least, a few people, a few employees trying to advance this as quickly as they can.
Okay. When are you going to be in a position? Because actually, let's start with, what is the process that you have to go through to understand the economics as to whether you do invest in a new circuit or some kind of upgrade to the current mill? Because you are going to need to spend some money in this thing, and obviously in this climate, money's tight. What's the process, and when do you make that decision?
Yeah, well, look, you've got to start from the material that's available to be processed. So, we'll start looking at different feeds. We have already got some feeds from other groups that we're testing to determine, what the mineralogy is and, what it takes to unlock some of these minerals. We've got a full lab at White Mesa. We can do a lot of pilot testing at White Mesa, which gets us, again, ahead of everybody else. We also have, and I have had a long relationship with ANSTO in Sydney with testing and on uranium projects, but they're also one of the world leaders on rare earths. I'm a firm believer that you need to know what you don't know. Remember that little saying I
love
said,
that phrase. Yes.
Start using it. But I've got a number of contacts with ANSTO. They can provide support where we don't have the knowledge in some of these areas. There also could be other people here in the United States or Canada that we may tap into. But we will go where we can get the best advice. But at the same time, we've got a head start with a full laboratory and the ability to pilot material right now. And we are testing rare earth material right now for recovery because we have facilities to do so.
And again, timing. Can you give us an idea of timing? Because okay, that's a process you're going through, but when people are going to be excited about, like you talked about $50 million earlier, right? So people are going to be excited about when are we going to start seeing some movement on this?
Yeah, look, there could be movement on this in the coming weeks. Okay, we think that it is possible, and I said this on the call, but I'm not, that we could be treating. So look at some of these streams. We think we can treat now. Okay, if they're suitable for our process or our modified process, but we think that this is not multiples of years out. This is just a year or two out for certain processing of certain streams. But again, we're not so far ahead that we can really give any specific dates. But we are far closer to the market than somebody that's trying to build a facility from scratch by years and years, and probably millions and millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know. It depends on the scale and the size. So we think we're offering something unique here and scarce. And that's a good place to be in.
It's a very good place to be in. So you're gonna, if it is weeks, you pick up the phone and let us know, because that's pretty exciting. That can be very exciting to everyone, because if you're able to, in a few weeks, start giving us definition of the process and the numbers and the timing, that would be great news indeed.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing is that look at, I mean, as I said, we've already started some testing, and if we have a party that we can team with, that we can go public with, we'll certainly update the market with that at the appropriate time. So but as I said, we do have material from some projects right now that we're looking at and we're testing as we speak.
So and just to be clear, because you mentioned you've got a lab facility. This isn't just regular toll milling. You've got a lab facility there. You're dealing with radioactive material. It's actually quite sophisticated, not just a kind of regular processing mill here we're talking about.
Yeah. Look, we've got the facility. We've got around 60 people at the facility. We have a very sophisticated lab. We have the ability to deal with those streams, dispose of those streams when we're done testing them. Just a very, very unique position to be in.
Okay, well let's move on from that. So thank you very much for explaining what's going on, what you're thinking. I do want more from you as it develops, please. The market, actually, we touched upon it earlier. Cigar Lake, Kazatomprom, Rossing, even Husab, all affected. Between 20 and 40 million pounds out of the market, just like that, almost in a 2-week period. Your share price has recovered. Lots of uranium juniors are feeling the benefits of that, and there's a kind of change in sentiment. So that's all good. I want to talk to you about what's the reality of how quickly the spot price moves to a point where you can start making a decision, because you talked about $40. $40 isn't going to move the dial for you. Do you think Kazatomprom and Cameco would like to control the price and make it remain somewhere around the the 40s? In which case, what do you do?
Yeah, look, I don't think $40 is enough for Cameco either.
Okay.
Look, there are some projects in Kazakhstan that probably 40 is a nice place to be. But I think that we still need that north of 50 to be sustainable, and really need closer to 60 to be able to take full loading on cost. If you took Cameco's cost on Cigar Lake or MacArthur, including exploration, development, and all that, they're going to be way above $40 per pound. And anyone from Cameco would agree with that. Now, going forward, and that's what most people are looking for right now is their going forward costs. So, look, I think that companies like Kazatomprom, would like it not to go too high so they can kind of maintain their, leading role there. But they've also benefited from the reduction, the weakening of their currency. This whole Russian oil pump it out, pushing down the ruble, pushing down the tenge, does also give them an advantage. So yeah, no, we do need higher prices, and really anyone in the Western world that says that they can do it at $40 per pound sustainably, I really, will question them. I think there may be one project that I know of in Australia that Olympic Dam and maybe the Heathgate Resources projects might be able to do really well at $40, but that's only a certain amount of production. I mean, if you look at demand being, starting to push towards 200 million pounds per year, there's only so many projects that can produce under that $40 per pound positively.
So here's the question: given what's going on at the moment, when do you think it's going to hit 40, and where do you think it's going to settle?
Well, that's the big question, Matt. But I think we've seen that the uranium price can move up quickly, fairly quickly. I mean, it's gone up, 25% in the last month or so. I think that these disruptions are starting to shake people up, and I think it may start shaking up the utilities a bit. I don't know if it'll happen, but some people have been saying that, uranium could go past 40 pretty quickly. I think there's less uranium out there than people think. I think that it's also apparent to me that what you see the Russians doing with oil and gas, they also want to do with uranium and nuclear fuel products. The Russian suspension agreement expires at the end of this year, where it was limiting the Russians to 20% of the market in the United States. I think they'd like to expand that. I think that is the absolute wrong thing to do, is allow the Russians to have a larger share of the U.S. market. So that's going to be an interesting saga to watch unfold over the rest of this year. So no, it's a very interesting time, and I think it's a time that a lot of our investors have been waiting for a long time, and they're starting to see how these little things all add up to be big things. So look, I wouldn't be surprised if we see 40. I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but shortly in the next month or two. But we may not.
Yeah, I think that's is the big question. Need to see what the utilities are doing. I mean, we're hearing. We spoke with a uranium trader. He said that he's been getting a lot more inbound phone calls. Not a lot more trading in terms of volume, small amounts, but where the utilities would typically, for him, sit back and just watch what the market is doing and watch it settle. Again, they've been one of the first on the phone, to him, and he's a reasonably big trader, so it's kind of indicative that they, as you said at the beginning, are perhaps a little bit more unsettled than they were 4 weeks ago.
Yeah. No, look, I think that people become complacent on these supply chains. When the price of uranium moved in 2006-07 very quickly, it was on the back of supply disruptions, flooding of MacArthur and Cigar Lake. And now those were longer term interruptions. I'm not sure how long the COVID interruption will last, but it just highlights that there's no certainty, and it doesn't mean that one of these mines can't flood again. It doesn't mean that there can't be a civil war or something else that happens that disrupts supply. So look, and I think the unfortunate thing about the world, and particularly the United States, is they become addicted to cheap. the American consumer, including a lot of companies and including utilities, they go for the cheapest product they can get for the lowest dollars. And I understand why everybody's trying to push the best margins they can, but going cheap on everything isn't necessarily the best plan. Look what we've discovered in the United States and in the world, actually, how dependent we are for a lot of our pharmaceuticals, and other supplies, health supplies, whatnot. The same thing's happening with energy, and let's watch this space, Matt.
Well, look, thanks very much. I mean, the thing I wanted to talk about was the rare earths. We should probably catch up and see what's going on with the rest of the organization with regards to the uranium and vanadium. Certainly as this price movement carries on through. I mean, every day feels like a news story to me. There's always something big going on in uranium at the moment. After a few years of, let's say, quiet, it's probably very welcome.
Well, look at Matt, and also, in our position as Energy Fuels, we've got a lot of inventory, and every time that price goes up, that inventory becomes more valuable. So we have around currently a little over 500,000 pounds of inventory. We expect that to grow to around 700,000 pounds of inventory. So, if you do your math at 5 to 700,000 pounds at $25 a pound, and then you do your math at say 5 to 700,000 pounds at 40 or 45, we can get a lot of bang out of that. And, we've been hoping to sell that material to the U.S. government and this national stockpile at a premium. And we still hope we can sell that at a premium. But unlike just about anybody else out there, we have inventory, and none of the small players have inventory. UR Energy has some inventory, but we have a lot more inventory than anyone out there in the world, outside of the Camecos and the Revas. We have substantial amount of inventory. So not only do we have cash in the bank, we've got inventory uranium, we've got inventory of vanadium, and we will play those to our best advantage.
Beautiful. I'm sure your shareholders are delighted to hear that. So, but let's finish up there. Appreciate your time. Glad to see you're well and keeping safe, and the family are well. Maybe let's talk next week, because I think next week's going to feel like a whole new story again. Well,
I hope so, because when the market moves, at least when the market's moving up, it all feels better, Matt.
It takes away a lot of problems, right? There's different sorts of questions. But yeah, okay. Well, look, we'll speak to you soon, Mark. Thanks very much for today. Appreciate your time.
Okay, Matt. Have a good evening.